It always takes just a second for us to connect to YouTube. All right, we are ready to go.
Great. Dr. Jackson, are you starting?
Oh, okay. Shannon, you want me to get started?
That'd be great. If you want to start us off, that'd be excellent, Jackson.
No, well,
we didn't really pick a chair yet for the subcommittee, so it makes sense to default to you for now.
okay. I was just sitting here waiting for you to kick us off. But welcome, everyone. Welcome to you.
Yeah, hi.
This meeting follows up to our last regular commission meeting where we talked about beginning to plan for the focus groups. And in addition to myself, Annie and Kim, we're the subcommittee for the focus group planning. So thank you, Shannon, for convening us. And that's the purpose of today's meeting, so that we can have some kind of a draft plan in place to present to our fellow commissioners when we next meet again, so we can move forward on this before too much more time passes by. So that's the purpose of the meeting. With Shannon, I'll just open that way and you can kick in and, you know, add to that.
Sure. Chair Jackson, what I would add is, since we started the Commission on Equity, there has been an interest, from the commissioners on, getting better connected with the community. And one idea that has continually come up is, creating some sort of focus groups. And so, part of the reason why we're having the conversation today is because of that interest, and to understand what might be some potential avenues for creating focus groups in the future. The purpose of today's meeting, like Chair Jackson said, was so that we can have some ideas to bring back to the larger Commission on Equity. That doesn't mean that we'll have, finalized ideas. I would like to consider, the first part of this meeting, kind of a conversation and brainstorming for us to get together and, talk about maybe some ideas that you all have for creating these focus groups. And then the final thing that I would add is, very much like our community engagement sessions, just because we, model a focus group or a couple of focus groups in one way doesn't mean that we can't go back and say, hey, what worked, what didn't work, what might not work in the future for, different groups that we're outreaching to as part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Annie, look like you have some thoughts you might want to kick in.
Well, whoops, did I lose you?
Nope, I see you, hear you.
Oh, okay. My screen is white.
Oh.
You never know, my computer. Yeah, well, just some things I was thinking about this meeting is really identifying what communities or sub-communities we want to target, and then I think highlight which one of those we would like to start with in this calendar year. So I wrote down some that I identified, and then finding who the cultural leaders of those groups are. I wish I could find my screen here. Oh, there we go. Oh, good. Identified who the cultural leaders are of those sub communities, and then contacting them, seeing where's a good place to meet those groups, and which commissioners should be in those meetings, those first meetings, and then we have to think of what are the kickoff questions that we would be asking in a focus group.
So that's kind of open up some questions for me as well. So we have any timeline? I know that we want to discuss this, and at Chair's are preparing to discuss further in the, with a bigger group of our commission. But do we have any time plan? How soon we want to do this, and how many? How do we determine who do we need to reach out? I know that Shanna should have some data as far as people who responded to our surveys. I mean, right? So do we want to kind of look at that and see if there's a community that's kind of not shown in that report? That probably give us some idea who we need to reach out. I mean, if we don't want to, right, duplicate it, people already submitted some respond, and we don't need to go back to them, right?
Well, I would respond first to Annie's points. The points she made, several I had jotted down, were very similar to that. As far as identifying key communicators in the sub-communities that we've talked about. And in those sub-communities, I'm referring to them as sub-communities as opposed to cultural groups. And to set a number, I was in my mind, as I jotted down some potential sub-communities, 10 at the most, and I'll come back and talk about who those were. But I think we need to look back at the rest of our calendar. When were we going to be making some decisions about our work plan? Because we want the input from the focus groups to help inform the work plan, in addition to what we've already heard from the two public sessions. So to make sure we overlap in that, and I have to go back and look at it myself. So if we were planning to have, for instance, the work plan finished by, let's say by April, then that means that these focus groups need to happen somewhere between now and before that time. I just as an example, so that we're doing things in sync, like it needs to happen. And then once we decide on which of these specific focus groups we want to engage, after identifying a key communicator to help us identify some people within those groups, come up with a recorder and a facilitator for each one, try and figure out the best venue so that people are as comfortable and willing to participate. And to bounce back on what Shannon said, to take the questions we asked in the listening sessions and adapt those to the focus group as best we can. So the input is pretty consistent, and actually provide an instruction sheet for those who's going to be facilitating. What did we learn from the first two open sessions? We didn't get hardly any participation on a Saturday afternoon. So, we learned from that people participate better on a weeknight. So that's the preliminary thinking I had been given it, and it's mostly in sync with what I heard you saying, Annie. And as far as who we heard from the first time around, once we identify those subgroups, I think to give another stab at trying to encourage people to be engaged, whether, let's say some representative of that subgroup had already chimed in, it doesn't necessarily mean that, it's enough to speak for that entire group. So my thinking, and I'll just finish my thoughts here and then come back and see how those flush. But I was thinking in terms of subgroups being our Latino community, Asian community, our Native American community, Pacific Islander. We have a significant senior citizen community in Lacey. I'd like to hear from our youth. I'd like to hear from our low-income people. I'd like to hear from our LGBTQ plus community, our small business owners, and then the Black group. And that comes out to be a 10. It could be fewer than that or more than that. But that was just kind of my thinking of how we can manage these focus groups and have them be efficient and effective, I guess. And so that was just my general thinking. just kind of open it back up to these specific groups of people, other than try to eliminate some group because we've heard from someone in that group already, so to speak.
Mhm.
So
Chair
just,
Jackson, just a
I just
point
took
of,
about 5 minutes and jotted those things down, knowing this call was coming up, but I haven't really given it any in-depth thought, but that was kind of off the top of my head.
and Chair Jackson, just a point of clarification. When you were talking about the work plan, were you talking about the strategic plan? The
Well,
diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan?
we've got the work plan and we've got the strategic plan. Sorry about that, my phone was interrupted. We've got the work plan and the strategic plan. They aren't necessarily one and the same, are they?
No, they're very different. One is kind of a yearly plan for us, and then the other one is a little bit longer of a plan.
Right. It's the work plan I'm talking about. The first thing we identified for this year of the commission. And depending on when we wanted that work plan to be completed, then that's where I think our timelines, but when we want to complete these focus groups would chime in.
So as far as the work plan goes, we did move forward with the 2022 work plan, and that does identify throughout the entire year that we will be having focus groups. Notably, it does not state, the number or exactly when that they would be happening, just that they would happen. So that does leave the commission, with the ability to, decide how many and kind of what the time frame is. Something to consider, though, connected to, as we're working on the strategic plan, is that timeline is somewhere in the July, August timeframe is when we look to be kind of moving forward with a draft, like a finalized draft. And so certainly I know, trying to get some more engagement from the community prior to moving forward with that was expressed by other commissioners throughout this process.
Then it's the strategic plan I'm talking about then, June, July, which gives us a window of, between now and then to get the input, incorporate in whatever we are putting into the strategic plan. So we really are reflecting the thoughts and concerns of our community.
So then Commissioner Sauer, to go back to, several of the questions that you raised, what are the timelines and how many? Again, I would say, we've built into the work plan that we're going to be doing this. We don't have a definitive start date, and we don't have a definitive how many. So that's certainly something, that you all can actively help, the commission move forward with, when you start wanting to have them, and then how many do you anticipate having?
Makes sense.
Yeah. What I would just on the top of my head, if we had say 6 months until we are at the point of finalizing the strategic plan, that maybe we could shoot for having 3, and then we would be having more afterwards, or we would reassess then afterwards. But so I would be in favor of really targeting 3 areas to hold 3 meetings in the next 6 months.
The one thing I would say about that, and I've done a lot of these strategic plans in my professional life, all of your guidelines will tell you a focus group should be 7 to 10 people. In order to get the kind of input from everybody participating that you possibly can, even with the guided facilitation. So 7 to 10 people, given the diverse community that we have here in Lacey, I'm not sure what process we would use to choose which 3 to go on with, because one thing we were talking about with the focus groups is that we wanted to give, for lack of a better word, subgroups a chance to feel comfortable with their input, with their questions, with their concerns. And focus groups are kind of light groups of people. So for instance, the youth, they might say something in just the presence of other youth that they wouldn't say if they're the only youth with some adults, or,
Right.
And so groups of 7 to 10 in a focus group we might be forever. We might be forever getting around to the sub-communities, the subgroups, the subcultural groups we know exist that we want to hear from.
Mhm.
That's a thought.
Mhm. So meaning that you would like to see us have more
I'd like
or
to see us
go
have more,
faster. Mhm,
and they
mhm.
could be happening simultaneously as
Yeah,
opposed
true.
to one at a time, or
True.
three at a
Mhm.
time. So if we've got, let's say 5 months, you know, 2 or 3, 3 or 4 months happening simultaneously, not necessarily at the same time, but
Mhm.
once we can plan it out, schedule out the venues, wherever those are, you know, the calendars, the times, what timelines fit best to the groups we're trying to work with, you know,
Mhm,
are
mhm.
trying to hear from. So we have a lot of key communicating to do, I would say, to
Mhm.
be as effective as we can.
How are we supposed to do the communication? I mean, you talked about, for example, for youth group, are we going to school and, recruit the participant there? What kind of idea do you have? How do we reach out to these communities?
Let's
And
use the youth group, for instance. We have a youth commissioner.
Mhm.
Elena is a terrific leader.
Mhm.
She's accustomed. She knows who the leaders of all the schools are, and just make her the facilitator. Ask her if she'd be the facilitator of the youth focus group, and let her
Mhm.
go for it.
Mhm.
You know, look at the people on our commission first of all, as
Yeah.
the reach out to people, and go from there. If we don't have a particular person, you know, I'd like to hear from the senior citizens. I am one, but I'm just saying, we can figure out who those key people are and kind of make assignments within our commission itself and go from
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think we utilize our the contacts that we have available to our diverse commission first, finding those communicators, encouraging them to gather the 7 to 10 people and facilitate, or maybe 2 of us could facilitate each group. Yeah, I think we've got a lot of community connections within our group. In terms of who, one of the sub communities that wasn't on your list is the disabled community.
Okay.
We got a lot of input from one
Right.
particular or other people. That's
Yes, we
another
did.
person, another group we want. So just off the, just in thinking about it, I would love to have one, maybe Alana's, to gather BIPOC students. I know the high schools have groups that she can plug in with, and she's very plugged in. I'd like to see maybe folks from Black community, Black churches community, or BLM. Like to see the non-English speakers have a real chance, which is difficult because it's more than one language. But Kim, we have Korean is the highest population, and then Vietnamese, I believe, but at least we could start with the Korean community. Latinx. And not really not sure how, but how can in my mind exactly find the key communicators in the low income category, but definitely there's some amazing challenges to the economics of of that. It's just.
I know the Community Action Council that we have here in the county deals primarily with that population. And so they have staff folk that could identify, you know, some of their able-bodied, low-income spokespeople, you know, be it from housing or food or, you know, education or employment, all of those perspectives they deal with within that Community Action Committee. And I think that agency could help us identify, you know, and that way, you know, they know who those folk are. Yeah.
And Chair Jackson, you also, you know, bring up a good point there with, you know, connecting with existing like nonprofits and groups like that as, you know, a good way to, you know, hear from groups and community members out in the greater area. So, you know, certainly considering, you know, nonprofits as in addition.
Well, one of the byproducts of this focus group activity could very well be some kind of, I won't say catalog, some kind of resource document of some kind that we come out of it having identified these key communicators within these specific communities for all kinds of purposes for the city, not just for our focus group. And right now, I'm not aware that such a listing exists when different people, you know, reach out. And so this can be a byproduct of contact people and contact information going forward, all kinds of uses.
And Chair Jackson, I think that would be a great addition to have in, you know, the strategic plan is, you know, that inventory of, you know, community groups out there. I do know the Athena group as well plans to discuss community networks and networking as part of workshop number 7, which will occur next month in February. So we'll get a little bit more insight too on what might be a good way to not only reach out to existing networks in the community, but to your point, how to collect that and, you know, have that be able to be a tool in the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan.
Great.
Yeah, working with nonprofits who are, you know, on the ground doing their work have a very good view that we don't necessarily have.
Well, I have a connection. Obviously, the connection that I had personally, I could actually offer that too, because we have Multicultural Service Center we just launched, and with the various different ethnicities and involving. So that's, yeah, we can help with that. So the questions that the dialogue that we want to engage is pretty much the same thing that we used during our 2 gathering sessions, right? We're just engaging those type of questions.
Well, I think we can revisit the questions we asked there, and we want to enhance that in somehow, but to use that as the springboard. Did the way we asked the question or the question we asked, did we really get the information we were looking for, or should we reframe it somehow or add something to it? But I think it can serve as kind of the jump off point as we craft these questions for the focus groups, and then the focus groups all would have the same question being asked. We would just be getting a response from different perspectives. So that's the only way we'll be able to actually code the data we get from it to you know, to make it as useful to us as possible.
Another question is, I mean, I think that we are thinking more like a virtual gatherings. I mean, is it just whatever that works? I mean, you know, surveys or in person or virtual, is it pretty much up to the person engaging and facilitating this event? You think we'll leave it like that?
Well, it's my thinking, and I don't know what the situation's going to be with COVID, you know, the next few weeks, the next few months. But as we're talking about groups of 7 to 10 people, I would think in person and social distancing could accommodate a group that small versus 20, 30, 40 people, you know. But it would be a controlled size group that I think social distancing and wearing masks and that kind of thing could accommodate it being an in-person thing, which would work a heck of a lot better for a focus group than a virtual Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that then, do we have a facility and do we have any budget as far as like, I don't know, refreshment of some kind? You know, coffee, water, something to offer.
So Commissioner Sauer, I'll jump in really quickly here. And number one, you know, if we are able to have in-person meetings, certainly that'll be something we will provide and offer. You know, we also want to make sure that there is not necessarily for the focus groups, but that we continue to have you know, alternative ways to engage moving forward. And so we can certainly take a look at, you know, what might make sense in 2022 to offer as an alternative engagement for just our general outreach and communications. But going back to the focus groups specifically, you know, if we are allowed to have, you know, in-person meetings, we can certainly, you know, have in-person focus groups. And for facilities, you know, we have, you know, several that are available, you know, here at City Hall, and then also with some of our community partners. And for refreshments, so we can certainly make sure that there's something available for the focus groups that are attending.
So I don't know, I'm just stretching it far a little bit. I don't know if I'm willing or capable of doing, but the reason I kind of suggested a focus group earlier was because a lot of folks that I'm aware of, they are working, right? So you can go to their workplace and stand there and ask questions, right? You can almost like going door to door for feedback. Some folks, that's what's required because they rather work, right? I mean, they can't pay for someone to watch their store while they come to the focus group. So that's just the reality. So I don't know if we want to go that extent. Is it up to me to like set a date and just drive around maybe 5-6 places and interview those people? You know, I don't know.
I think we have to be flexible, and if we have to do what we need to do to get people's input, and if we have a set of questions and we have them written down, and you just had a little notebook of them, and can I, you know, stop by somewhere? Can I get a few, you know, opinions and suggestions and write them down, and then that gets fed into our accumulated data. I think that's great.
I think that would stretch us too far as a commission. I mean, we've got the questions online. We've got a survey for anyone who can't make a focus group. Hopefully that key communicator wouldn't be trying to get that person, you know, to find 7 to 10 people who are available. The idea of a focus group is to bring people together where a dialogue is happening between those people. They're feeding off one another and their questions and their answers. And would you clarify what you mean by that? And could you speak to that point you just made? And so that's it. When you say focus, we're focusing in on a particular set of questions from a particular group of people. And so the whole idea of going to where people are takes away from the focus group concept. And, you know, hopefully people can identify 7 to 10 people in these subgroups that, you know, can take the time, commit hour and a half or whatever, and participate, and we'd be done with it. But to be out trying to interview people, I think we'll never finish this process. So that's kind of my input to your thought there, Kim, about going out to people's grocery stores, asking them questions. But we can certainly go out to them and say, here are the questions. Would you mind answering these questions in the survey we have posted? You know, we're interested in your input. So those mechanisms are already in place as alternative input methods, I think. And a lot of people did avail themselves of it.
So Chair Jackson, you know, I think, we're talking about focus groups, which are very specific, to having people come together and have a conversation. I think what Commissioner Sauer is bringing up, though, is a really good idea to continue to consider, particularly when we're trying to identify gaps in maybe, some of the voices that we hear from in the community and how we can reach out better to get their perspective. So, as we continue this process, I think Commissioner Sauer brings up a really good idea of, should there be gaps or identified barriers, that might be an alternative solution moving forward with some additional community engagement.
Not as a not to do with every community, but if that works, if that's the main way to get information from that community, I'm for it too.
Yeah, and that would just be another mechanism in addition to focus groups. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not eliminating. I'm just saying that model does not fit into the definition of what a focus group is. So if that's another model or another vehicle we want to use to also gather information, then we can do that. If that's the will of the commission and we have the wherewithal and the resources to do it, anything and everything we can do to make sure we're as comprehensive in the data that we gather. I was just making the point, so that would be above and beyond focus groups and be another mechanism we had not yet identified.
Yeah, I definitely understand, but I think we do need to acknowledge that it's part of the reality that a lot of folks that are working, that if you have to find somebody to watch your store to be released, I mean, that's quite a bit of a segment. I mean, especially around my circle of friends, they're all working pretty much. And that's what they have to do. You have to go to their store when you need to talk to them and stuff like that. So I definitely understand what is being said. It's also important to acknowledge that's another reality if we wanted to really make it like truly accessible to various need.
Kind of back to the set of questions. I'm with you, Thelma, that we should look at what questions that we asked. Did we get the best responses from? I mean, the most, stirred up the best responses, and eliminate what didn't seem to work for people. There was a lot of silences when we asked a question sometimes. I also would like to add, just as a suggestion, to solicit ideas about artwork that people would like to see, and maybe artists in their community to kind of start to get help the city and their artworks start to get a list of local resources and ideas. That was one thing. And the other one was how does this particular focus group see the promotion of BIPOC businesses in town, and see if we can get some more information and more ways to encourage that. I think they can be a little bit more personal. I'm hoping that we get a few more personal stories and just get a little bit more intimate.
Shannon, are you getting the kind of feedback you were hoping from the three of us that would help us with some kind of a draft plan to present to our commissioners at our next meeting? Are we making enough coherent sense to you?
Yeah, Chair Jackson, this has been very, very helpful. A couple of things just to, throw out here for ideas for you all is, Chair Jackson mentioned that the Lacey, the city has a youth council, and that's the Lacey Youth Council. And so that would be just naturally a kind of great starting point for a focus group to connect with, and certainly something we can set up while we're working, with other organizations and other individuals in the community is a joint meeting with the Lacey Youth Council to get some more perspectives from, the youth voices in our community moving forward. And then we can expand that in the future. I think Commissioner Sauer, you mentioned, groups that exist in high schools. Commissioner Clay, I think you also mentioned some nexus there, but, just having this youth council is a great kind of foundational piece and something that we could do pretty quickly in the next couple of months while we start to build momentum and connecting with other groups that exist in the community. We also have an opportunity coming up is the Lacey Cultural Celebration on March 12th. And we're going to have a presentation from the Parks Department actually at our next meeting just to talk a little bit about, what the cultural celebration is. But it might be a really good idea to see if there is an opportunity for the Commission on Equity to have a presence there and to make some connections with some existing groups to see if there is, a way to move forward with some focus groups coming out from there.
Good.
Yeah.
So this is very helpful. I will put together kind of a recap of the conversation and, some steps forward, and we can bring this back to the larger Commission on Equity and have an additional conversation on that.
Great.
Would it be helpful to identify the first four and just as recommendations? Or
Commissioner Clay, I don't think that's not helpful. I think though too, when we're reaching out to, groups and individuals, we certainly want some flexibility just given, other people's timelines and when we might be able to get groups together. So, I think maybe in the interim between now and next Monday to be thinking about that, and certainly something that we can have as a conversation with the larger group on Monday and how to proceed.
Mm-hmm. And going back to our we talked about each one of the commissioners have some connection that might be easy to go, and we could just ask who has connections, who would like to, has an idea of where they want to step up. Mm-hmm.
And Commissioner Clay, I think that's a great way to go about this. The connections already built, and then to kind of build momentum moving from that, working with that commissioner as number one, a facilitator. And having another commissioner join them. I do like the idea of having a couple facilitators per each of the focus groups, and then coming back and reporting out to the larger commission on what some of the items were heard and talked about. And then also keeping those connections moving forward, for future conversations with those groups.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, sound like you have enough to work with as far as pulling some notes together then, Shannon, and the discussion that will ensue with the rest of our fellow commissioners from those ideas should launch us on our way where we can begin to, solidify things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I certainly appreciate the thought and the conversation. So thank you all for helping, put some guidance on here and some steps forward. I appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah. Good to work
Okay, thank
with
you,
y'all.
Shannon. See you guys.
All
I'll
right.
talk to you all soon.